Narrator calm, chilling tone. We grow up being told one simple rule. If something's wrong, call the police. That's the safety net we cling to. The idea that no matter what happens, if someone breaks in, if someone follows you, if someone threatens your life, you can pick up the phone, dial 3 numbers, and someone will come rushing to protect you. But what if that safety net wasn't there? What if the people we're taught to depend on, the ones in uniform with the badge and the training, couldn't help you? Not because they didn't want to, but because they simply couldn't. They didn't see what you saw. They didn't hear what you heard. By the time they arrived, the danger was gone, leaving nothing but your fear behind. It's one of the most terrifying realities you can face. Realizing you are truly on your own. Imagine calling 911 again and again, your voice shaking, begging for help, only to be told there's nothing they can do. Imagine knowing someone's watching you, following you, tormenting you, and still nobody believes you. Imagine lying awake at night, clutching your phone, praying the sound you just heard downstairs was nothing, but also knowing that if it wasn't nothing, help won't arrive in time. These are not stories about the failures of police. They're stories about the limits of protection, about the cracks in the system where people fall through, where danger becomes unstoppable. Tonight, we're going to step into those cracks. You'll hear about a woman stalked night after night, calling for help over and over, only to discover that the terror outside her window was more patient, more determined than anyone could have imagined. You'll meet a family who thought they were safe in their dream home, only to realize that someone or something was watching them, slipping away each time police searched, leaving behind only fear and unanswered questions. And finally, the story of a man whose desperate pleas for safety went unheard until it was far too late. A man who knew he was in danger, begged for someone to intervene, but whose story ended in the most horrifying way possible. These are stories of people who did everything we're told to do: report, document, call, trust the system. But the system wasn't enough. So settle in, because tonight, we're about to explore what happens when the thin line between safety and horror vanishes completely. Narrator, calm, eerie tone. Our first story begins with a woman named Emily, a young professional in her mid-20s who had just relocated for a new job. She was independent, hardworking, and determined to make this new city her fresh start. She found herself a modest one-bedroom apartment on the edge of downtown. Nothing fancy, but it was hers. She decorated it with plants, strung fairy lights along the window, and felt that quiet comfort of finally building her own little space in the world. But it didn't take long before the cracks in that comfort began to show. First, it was little things. A flower pot she was certain she had left on the right side of her balcony railing had been moved to the left. A garbage can she remembered tucking against the wall was suddenly halfway down the alley. One evening, coming home from work, she noticed her welcome mat turned completely around. They were small details, easy to brush off. Maybe she had misremembered. Maybe it was the wind. But then came the feeling. Sound. Faint breathing, then silence. The sense of being watched. She'd step out onto her balcony at night to water her plants, and her eyes would instinctively drift to the street below. More often than not, there was someone there. A shadowy figure, leaning against the lamppost across the street, not moving, not smoking, not on their phone, just standing, looking up. At first, Emily told herself it was coincidence. Cities are full of strangers. But then came the footsteps. Late at night, as she lay in bed, she began hearing the sound of gravel crunching outside her window. Slow, deliberate, stopping and starting, as though someone was pacing just beneath her apartment. Finally, one night, she worked up the courage to call the police. Sound. Faint phone dial tone. She explained what was happening. The noises, the man across the street, the moved objects. But the officer on the other end simply sighed and said, "Ma'am, unless there's an actual crime, there's nothing we can do. There's probably nothing. Call us if it happens again." It was the answer she dreaded, dismissal. And it only got worse from there, because the man wasn't just across the street anymore. The escalation came quickly. One morning, Emily stepped outside her door and found a note taped to it. Just 3 words, scrawled in jagged handwriting. "See you soon." Her stomach dropped. She immediately reported it, holding the paper in a plastic bag like evidence. But the police? They told her without fingerprints, without a name, there wasn't much they could do. Days later, she woke up at 3 a.m. to a sound that turned her blood cold. Sound. Slow metallic rattling of a doorknob. Someone was trying her doorknob. Not violently, not kicking or pounding. Just twisting, testing it. She froze in her bed, heart hammering in her chest, barely breathing as the sound stopped. The next morning, she begged her friends for advice. Their solution was simple: move. But moving wasn't an option. She had just signed her lease, put down a deposit, and her savings were thin. Besides, moving wouldn't guarantee the man wouldn't follow her. So she stayed and endured. The notes continued, sometimes slipped under her door, sometimes taped to her window. Always short, always vague. Things like, nice dress, or, I like when you're home early. He was watching her. Constantly. Emily called the police again and again, but the story was always the same. We'll send someone to check the area. By the time officers arrived, the man was always gone. No evidence. No proof. The night of terror came 2 weeks later. Emily was sitting on her couch, trying to distract herself with TV, when something made her glance toward the window. And there he was, a man, standing just outside the glass, his face half hidden in shadow but his eyes unmistakable, locked on hers. Sound. Sharp intake of breath, then silence. She screamed, grabbed her phone, and called 911, voice shaking so violently she could barely speak. He's outside my window. He's here right now. The dispatcher told her to stay calm, that officers were on their way. Emily clutched a kitchen knife and crouched in the corner, eyes never leaving the window. But as the sirens wailed faintly in the distance, the man slowly backed away, faded into the darkness. By the time the police arrived, there was no sign of him. They shone their flashlights around, checked the alley, but found nothing. One of them even shrugged and said, "Could have been your reflection." Emily wanted to scream, but the true horror came days later. She returned home from work one evening and immediately noticed something wrong. Her front door, always locked tight, was ajar. Just slightly. Sound. Door creaking open slowly. She pushed it open with trembling hands. Inside, nothing looked stolen, but it looked lived in. A blanket she didn't remember leaving on the couch. Coffee mug still faintly warm. And in her bedroom closet, buried behind her coats, she found a small pile. Food wrappers, a half-empty water bottle, and one of her own shirts neatly folded. Someone had been inside her home. Not once, not twice, but over and over again. Living there while she was gone. She called the police immediately, this time frantic, begging them to take it seriously. Officers came, searched, documented what she found. But once again, there was no one there. No fingerprints, no clear evidence pointing to a suspect. And the words she heard chilled her more than anything else. "Ma'am, there's not much we can do." That night, Emily didn't sleep. She sat upright on her bed, knife in hand, every creak of the building making her jump. By morning, she knew what she had to do. She called her landlord, explained she had to break the lease. She didn't care about the penalties, the lost money. Within a week, she packed up everything she owned, loaded her car, and left the city. She moved states away, closer to family, never once looking back at that apartment. The stalker? He was never caught, never identified. To this day, Emily has no idea who he was, how long he had been inside her apartment, or how close he came to doing something far worse. All she knows is that sometimes, when you feel that creeping sense of being watched, it's not paranoia. It's not imagination. It's real. And sometimes, no matter how many times you ask for help, no one can save you from it. Narrator, low, unsettling tone. The Martins thought they had finally made it. For years, they had saved every penny, dreaming of owning a house of their own. Something big enough for their 2 kids, somewhere quiet, away from the stress of city life. When they stumbled across the farmhouse on the edge of a wooded area, it felt like fate. 2 stories tall, a wide yard that backed right into the trees, and a wraparound porch where Mrs. Martin imagined sipping her morning coffee. It was old, yes, but solid. A house with character. A house where they could build their future. At first, life there was exactly what they wanted. Quiet, peaceful. But it didn't stay that way. The first signs were subtle. At night, when the world outside had gone still, faint scratching sounds would tap against the windows. Not the rattling of branches in the wind. Not the sound of an animal scurrying across the roof. This was different. Slow, deliberate, almost like fingernails dragging across glass. Then came the knocks. Always at the back door. Always after midnight. 2 sharp raps, spaced perfectly apart. The first night, Mr. Martin thought maybe it was a lost neighbor or some harmless prank. He grabbed a flashlight, went to the door, and swung it open. No one was there, just the dark wall of trees. The next night it happened again. And again the night after that. They tried to rationalize it. Animals, maybe. A raccoon knocking something over. But one morning, they found muddy footprints leading up to the back door. Human footprints. There. And there were no prints leading away. That's when they called the police for the first time. Officers arrived, walked the perimeter, checked the locks, shined their lights across the tree line. But they didn't find anything. No signs of forced entry, no trespassers hiding nearby. Their explanation? Probably just animals. Maybe some local kids messing around. Keep your doors locked. The Martins tried to accept that answer. But the sounds didn't stop. If anything, they grew worse. Footsteps circling the house at night. Shadows that seemed to move at the edge of the yard. Mr. Martin decided to take matters into his own hands. He bought a set of security cameras, wired them around the house, and felt reassured knowing he would finally catch whoever or whatever was out there. But when he reviewed the footage, his blood ran cold. Every single time the noises happened, the cameras glitched. Entire minutes of static, as though someone had cut the feed on purpose. He called the police again, showed them the corrupted clips. But once more, they dismissed it. Could just be a technical issue. Without clear video, there's nothing we can do. Things came to a head when the kids got involved. One night, their 8-year-old daughter woke up screaming. When her parents rushed into the room, she sobbed that she saw a man's face at her window. Pale, grinning. Her 15-year-old brother, normally calm and skeptical, swore he saw it too. Mr. and Mrs. Martin tried to calm them, reassure them it was just a nightmare. But when they stepped outside to check, the grass beneath the window looked freshly trampled. That was the night fear became routine. Sound. Muffled children screaming, then silence. A few weeks later, things escalated to the point of no return. It was just after 2 a.m. when the sound came. Footsteps. Not outside, not on the porch, but above them, in the attic. The noise was heavy, purposeful, moving from one end of the ceiling to the other. The kids screamed from their bedrooms. Mrs. Martin clutched the phone and called 911. There's someone in our attic. Please, send help right now. Police arrived quickly this time, storming through the house, flashlights sweeping across every corner. They pulled down the attic ladder and climbed up. But once again, nothing. Just insulation. A few old boxes. Dust and cobwebs. They searched the crawl spaces, the basement, every closet. But there was no one. No footprints. No evidence. The officers exchanged uneasy glances but still offered the same conclusion. Could have been an animal. Maybe the house is settling. Without proof of a break-in, there's not much else we can do. But the Martins knew what they had heard. Those were not raccoon footsteps. Eventually, the family made the only decision they could. They couldn't keep living like this. Jumping at every noise, losing sleep, watching their children cry from fear. They began packing. Slowly, carefully, preparing to put the house on the market. And that's when Mr. Martin made the discovery that still keeps him awake at night. He was in the attic, moving boxes of Christmas decorations, when he noticed something odd. A section of insulation in the far corner didn't look quite right. It was uneven, pushed inward. Curious, he pulled it back. Behind it was a small crawl space, narrow, dark, and hidden. And inside were the signs. A blanket, rolled into the corner. Empty food wrappers, a bottle of water, and worst of all, a notebook. Inside were scribbles, drawings of the house, notes about the family, their routines, when the lights went off, when the kids left for school, when the parents were gone. Someone had been living in their attic, watching them, for weeks. Sound, hollow echo, slow dripping water. When police returned, they didn't deny it. Yes, it looked like someone had been there. Yes, it was possible the family had been sharing their home with a stranger. But without fingerprints, without DNA, without a suspect, there was nothing they could do. And that was the final straw. The Martins sold the house at a massive loss, desperate to get out. To this day, they don't know who it was. A drifter? A stalker? A stranger who had been watching the property long before they moved in? All they knew was this. The scariest part wasn't the scratching on the glass. It wasn't the knocks at the door. It wasn't even the footsteps in the attic. It was the knowledge that someone had been inside their home, living just a few feet above them, while they slept in their beds. And the police, despite all the calls, all the searches, couldn't stop it. He was 32, working a steady job at a small logistics firm, living in a modest apartment in a quiet neighborhood. To most, he was just another face in the crowd, someone who kept to himself, paid his rent on time, and didn't make trouble. But to him, life had started to feel different. It began with little things. A car parked across from his building for hours at a time. A man sitting inside, wearing sunglasses even when it was cloudy. When he walked to work, he'd catch the same figure a block behind him. At first, he told himself he was imagining it. Paranoia. Maybe just a coincidence. But over time, the coincidences piled up too neatly. One evening, leaving work late, he spotted the same car from his street idling near the office parking lot. The driver didn't make eye contact, didn't acknowledge him, just sat there, watching. His heart raced as he got into his own car and drove home. That night, he couldn't shake the feeling. For the first time, he called the police. He explained what was happening. A strange man following him, a car outside his home and work. The dispatcher's tone was polite, but dismissive. Unless a crime has occurred, sir, there's not much we can do. Just keep an eye out. It was the beginning of a pattern, one that would end in tragedy. Build up. The next week, things escalated. Notes began appearing under his windshield wiper. Slips of paper with vague but menacing words. You can't hide. I see you. Then came the phone calls. Always at night. Always from blocked numbers. Sometimes silence on the line. Other times heavy breathing, followed by a click. Terrified, he started documenting everything. He bought a notebook and filled it with details. Dates, times, plate numbers, even sketches of the man he kept seeing. He compiled call logs from his phone, stapled the notes to the pages. He wanted to build a case, something undeniable. With his binder of evidence, he walked into the local police station. He handed it over, explaining he was being stalked, that he feared for his life. The officer behind the desk flipped through a few pages, sighed, and slid it back. We can't act on this, they told him. It's circumstantial. Unless he threatens you directly or harms you, our hands are tied. That phrase, our hands are tied, burned into his memory. He left the station more alone than ever. Days later, while walking home from the grocery store, he felt it again. That prickle on the back of his neck. He turned, and there the man was. Same build, same posture, a hood pulled up to conceal his face. Their eyes met for just a second before the figure ducked into a side street. He reported it. Again, the police did nothing. By now, his friends had started to doubt him too. Maybe you're stressed, they said. Working too much. Could be your imagination. Even his mother gently suggested he see a doctor. Paranoia. Anxiety. But he knew. This was real. Climax. The breaking point came on a Wednesday night. He was at home, trying to distract himself with TV, when a sound made him freeze. A faint rattle. Someone testing his front doorknob. His stomach dropped. Slowly, carefully, he crept to the door. Through the peephole, nothing. Just darkness. But then, a shadow shifted. sliding out of view. He bolted back to his phone and dialed 911. His voice shook as he begged for officers to come quickly, telling them someone was trying to break into his apartment. It took them 20 minutes to arrive. By then, the intruder was gone. The officers checked around the building, saw no forced entry, and shrugged. One of them even suggested it might have been kids messing around. He didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the floorboards, every hum of the pipes made him jump. 3 days later, his neighbors noticed something odd. His apartment door was splintered, the lock busted in. They knocked, called his name, no answer. Inside, the place was in disarray. He was gone. The search lasted for weeks. Flyers went up. Detectives finally started interviewing people, canvassing the area. Suddenly, all the evidence he had collected before was taken seriously. The notebook, the phone records, the notes. But it was too late. 1 month later, hikers stumbled upon his body in a wooded area miles from his home. The condition made it clear. This wasn't suicide. This wasn't an accident. He had been murdered. Aftermath. The homicide investigation dragged on. Detectives admitted privately that the man had come to them multiple times before, pleading for help. His complaints were all logged, every phone call, every in-person report. But nothing had been done, because no crime had officially been committed at the time. Now, with a body, it was different. Now it mattered. His family was devastated. They had heard his fear, seen the toll it took on him, but they too had believed maybe it was in his head. Living with the knowledge that they hadn't fully believed him, it broke them. The stalker? Never caught. No arrests. No justice. Just a cold case file gathering dust in the back of a police station. Reflection. The most haunting part of the story isn't the murder itself. It's the way it unfolded in plain sight. This man knew something was wrong. He documented everything. He begged for help. And yet, because the threat didn't fit neatly into the box of criminal activity, the system did nothing. It's a reminder of how fragile safety really is. We like to think the police will protect us, that the law is a shield we can rely on. But sometimes the shield only rises after blood is spilled. Sometimes action comes not when we need it most, but when it's far too late. And perhaps the most terrifying thought of all, how many other people are out there, tonight, documenting their own stalkers, calling in their own fears, being told the same phrase, "There's nothing we can do," because sometimes the most dangerous threat isn't the stranger in the dark. It's the silence of those who were supposed to listen, a young woman who felt eyes on her every night. But no one believed her until she found proof the stalker had already been inside her home. A family who realized the haunting noises in their attic weren't ghosts, but someone living above them, waiting for the right moment. And a man who did everything right. Documented, reported, pleaded for help, only to vanish. His body found weeks later in the woods. Different faces, different circumstances, but the same theme running through each. When victims reached for help, the system failed to reach back. The police weren't lazy. They weren't cruel. They were bound by procedure, by the cold logic of evidence. They needed fingerprints, forced entry, a crime in progress. But what victims felt, the crawling skin, the breathless dread, the undeniable sense that something was wrong, those things don't count as evidence. Fear doesn't show up on a police report, and yet, fear is often the truest sign of danger. That's what makes these stories so haunting. They show us the gap between the rules that are supposed to protect us and the reality we actually live in. The law demands proof, but evil doesn't always leave proof behind, at least not until it's far too late. Think about it. The woman who broke her lease and fled her apartment will always wonder if she narrowly escaped something worse. The family who discovered a stranger in their attic will never hear a creak in the night the same way again. And the man who tried so hard to be taken seriously, his reports are now evidence. But evidence of a murder investigation, not protection that could have saved him. That's the true horror here. Not just the stalkers, the trespassers, or the killers, but the silence before the storm. The moment when someone begs for help and nothing happens. Because the truth is, the police can't be everywhere. They can't act on feelings. They live in a world of procedure, paperwork, and proof. But danger doesn't follow procedure. It waits in the shadows, in the space between what can be proven and what is already known deep in the pit of your stomach. So the next time you hear footsteps outside your window, or a knock you weren't expecting in the dead of night, don't assume someone else will protect you. Don't assume that help will arrive before harm does. Because when the police can't help, the only thing standing between you and the nightmare is you.